So Raj, I went ahead and started the recording. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I am looking forward to hearing what you've got. I think it's going to be pretty entertaining for the part that I've seen. And Roger has asked me to read a little bit at the end, so I'll do that. Raj, you're going to have to guide me a little on sharing my screen and how you want that part to go. So
Okay, I'll let you know. Tonight we are going to talk about the photo that's over my shoulder. That's well known in the family. It's a photo that a lot of Echo Walk households have in their home. This one that I have, uh, it was put together by my father, and my mother gave it to me after he died. And so we'll talk a little bit about the history of this photo because there are so few photos of the old man there, Echo Hawk. And this photo, I think, has some interesting things to say about it, but there's a lot I don't know. And so that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this in the hopes that others in the family will have information that can shed some further light on the history of the photo and how it came about. So, Lance, if you want to go ahead and show the first photo that I sent you.
Okay, let me see if I can do this now. I practiced a little bit on this. And now I forgot what it was I did to make that work. Let me find you here. So there's one way of looking at it.
Okay, I think that works for me. If
Actually, I think this is better.
Okay, this is a group photo of Echo Hawk and his fourth wife, Carrie Norman West Echo Hawk Sacto, if I got all those names right. They got married, I think, in 1903, right around that time period. And they had a son who's there with them, Leo Echo Hawk, who was born in 1904. And so, as you can see, the photo of Echo Hawk is the same as the photo that's over my shoulder. That's the same image. Maybe a close comparison would show some differences that would indicate otherwise. But I'm assuming that this is the same image. And so I I happened to come across this 2 Christmases ago, 2019. Somebody posted on the Pawnee tribal family and tribal and family news Facebook page, posted an article that had been written by Brummett about Christmas at in 1965, and it had this photo and 3 illustrations with it. And so I wrote to ask, well, could you do a scan of the family photo? Because I'd never seen it before. And so she scanned it. Her name is Tracy Smith. She scanned that corner of the image that she had and posted it. So that's where this photo here comes from. This is a scan of a newspaper article that was published in 1965 by Brummett. So this is a real important image because I'm not aware that anybody in the family has the original. I'm guessing that it's out there, and if somebody has information about it at one of these family meetings, it would be great to talk about that and even to see a good version of the original photo. But this may be the best that we're ever going to have access to. I don't know. So I did my best, and then Lance worked on this photo to try to enhance it and improve the image. And this is the so far the best that we've been able to do. So I'm real grateful to have this image now. I think to date this photo, we have an opportunity to do that by comparing it to a second photo. So Lance, if you could switch to number 2. This is a photo of Leo Echo Hawk. Now, if you go back and forth between the two photos, you'll see some differences. In this photo, see, it's the same photo shoot in my opinion, but there are some differences. Like look in this photo here, Echo Hawk, you can't really tell very easily, but he's wearing a medallion. Now, if you go back to the portrait of Leo, you can see that medallion. And so he's not wearing the medallion in the group photo, and here he's wearing the medallion. In addition, yeah, see, you can see Echo Hawk's got the medallion on, and Leo doesn't. But other than that, he's got the same outfit on. Now, look at the tobacco bag that Echo Hawk has. It's got all these fringes running along it. And if you go to the photo of Leo, the second photo, you can see there's all these fringes, but you can't see what it is. So he's got the medal and he's got something in his lap that it's a shawl with fringes, or maybe he's got the tobacco bag under there. I don't know. So those are the two differences. Otherwise, he's seated on the same stool. His hair is the same. He's got the same fan, the same clothing. And the caption for this is Leo Echo Hawk, age 10. And so if he was born in 1904 and he really was age 10 in this photo, the photo had to be taken sometime after September 1914 when he turned 10. So this photo session must have taken place in late 1914 or early 1915. So in that general time period. Now, what's going on with the family at this moment in time? The group photo shows only these 3 family members. George, I think, is not present because he's in school, I think at Chilocco. So he would have been at the end of 1914, he would have been about age 15, maybe 16. And also, Carrie West, she had a previous daughter by her previous husband, Lucy West Gilmore. Lucy's not here. She's off at boarding school. If I remember correctly, it might have been Carlisle. I think it was Carlisle. And so they were off at school. But here's the thing. As we discussed in a previous meeting, the family was pretty well off. we estimated that around 1915, Lucy West had the equivalent wealth of about $500,000 from properties that she was a co-heir to with her mother. And so Lucy and her mother together in this household would have made this family right here millionaires. So on paper, at least, they were well off. And so for whatever reason, they decided to get this portrait done. And I don't know the reason for the portrait. I've never heard about that. But now we can estimate when it was taken. I've always wondered about that ever since I saw the portrait of the old man by himself. Well, when was this photo taken? How old was he? Was he younger? Was he older? It's hard to tell from the quality of the photo. So in this photo, we can comparing it to the Leo photo. Now, Lance, go back to the Leo photo. This photo was from a Pawnee homecoming program published in the 1964 Pawnee homecoming program. Now, Brummett was very active in the Veterans Affairs of that time. He was very active, and I think he probably arranged to get this photo from Leo and publish it in the 1964 issue of the Pawnee homecoming program. And so I don't know if the age 10 attribution on this photo is correct, but I'm assuming that when Brummett borrowed the photo from Leo, Leo said I was 10 when this was taken. So I don't know, he could have been a little younger or a little older, but that's a good working assumption to make that he was about age 10 when the photo was taken. And so that's the importance of this photo. It allows us to date the other one. And it's from the 1964 Pawnee homecoming program. So there's, I think, an arguable, if speculative, connection through Brummett. Brummett had a hand in getting this published. Okay, so let's go to the next photo, Lance, number 3. This is the photo that is on Echo Hawk's headstone. Now you can see that it's very different than the photo that's over my shoulder here. The qualities of it are different, and it's a different image. Now, here's a question that I have that I assume somebody out there may have an answer for. But I'm assuming that when the old man died in March 1924, the headstone was put up on his grave. Sometime soon after that, whether later that year or the next year. But I'm assuming that the headstone went up fairly soon. And I'm assuming that this photo was prepared to put on it at the
Roger,
same.
this is Lucille. I was told, and I think it was by Uncle Brummett, Uncle Brummett erected that headstone for Echo Hawk because before there wasn't one. And I don't recall the year that he told me he did that, but this was Uncle Brummett's doing.
Oh, okay, that's really interesting. So my guesses about this clearly are not well founded. So if Brummett is the person who had the headstone put up and the photo attached to it, we can only guess that maybe that happened during the 40s or 50s. So that's when this photo was added to it. So that that clarifies what I was going to say next. That adds something important to it. Now, I don't know if this photo has been there since the headstone was erected there. I'm just assuming that this is the same photo that's been there all this time. I found it online with no date of when the photo was taken. In other words, a photo of the headstone. And so I'm just guessing now with Lucille's information that the headstone was erected probably in the late 40s or sometime during the 50s.
I don't know when it was, and we should probably, I don't know if Joe or Steve would know, would have better, an idea of when exactly Uncle Brummett did that. I would think it's probably more like the 60s, but I could be wrong because I saw Uncle Brummett most often in the 70s. And it was sometime in there that he told me that he had done this. And we have some of our family photos, and Katie may have these, that are taken with us as young people around this headstone. But that would have been after Uncle Brummett had it erected or placed, whatever the right term is.
Well, that is really helpful. So maybe during the 60s, and that would make sense given the trajectory of Brummett's career. I don't know how successful he was early on, but later on, he felt in a position to do this.
I think you're absolutely correct because, by then, his artwork had gained some attention nationally, and he was doing the work for the Western Horseman and his comic strip and whatnot. So he would have, been in a better financial position to do this kind of thing, because obviously that headstone was not a cheap endeavor to buy and install.
Now, when you look at this photo and compare it to the next one is, I think, I'm assuming that the next photo in the series is the one that is commonly used in the family. This, now, as I understand it, my father had this. This is the photo that's hanging behind me. And what my mother told me was that my father had this photo made up in a larger size and copies made of it, which he was intending on handing out to his siblings and to the family. He had copies made of it, and so I don't know how many he gave out, but after he died, there were still some copies, and I think we handed those out at that time. And so this was a project that my father did. Now, Lance, go back to the previous one. You can see when you zoom in that there are some differences, like the shading around his eyes. You can see here the eyes are lighter shaded, and those are not eyebrows, but are instead the shadows in his eye sockets. Now, Lance, if you go back to the other photo, those sure do look like eyebrows here, but they're not. And I always assumed that whoever made this image added eyebrows onto Echo Hawk, but you can see that it's possible that this was an artifact of the processing of the photo to produce the image that is a portrait of Echo Hawk without Carrie and Leo there. And so I don't know if that shading was done. If you look at his hair around his face, it's dark as well, very dark compared to the other image. Let's go back and let's look at that. So you can see here his hair looks more naturally colored, like he's got gray in there. It's not as dark. And so there may have been some processing factor here that darkened certain areas, or the photographer was asked to touch up the photo, and that's one of the things he did. Now you can also see it in the image that's on the tobacco bag. If you look at it here, it's prominent, very well defined. And so it's not a lot different than the other photo, but Lance, go to the next photo. See, you can see now it looks a little darker. And so again, I'm not sure if that's an artifact of the processing or if the photographer darkened certain areas of this image here. So now with what Lucille said, we can get to the final part of this this question, this mystery. Uncle Hope told me that George is the one who had this photo portrait made. And he said his motive was this. When his mother died, he was very young and no memories of his mother. He was like age 2 or 3 when his mother died, and his father, Echohawk, married Carrie West. And George grew up in that household, and he felt that she favored Leo. And so I don't know the details of that. Obe was not real specific, but he grew up feeling like his stepmother favored his younger brother Leo. And so he had this photo made up and Carrie and Leo taken out because he wanted a portrait of his father that didn't include them. So I don't really know. That's the only person I've heard that from. I don't know what all those internal relationships were like and the reasons for it. This is just what Hope told me. And so it makes sense that George would have had this done maybe in the late 40s or early 50s, and would have had a photo made that he hung in his house, that he gave copies to Brummett and others. And that Brummett now, as we could suggest, he took his copy of that after George had died and did his copy, used it to do the headstone photo. And so the headstone photo and this one are slightly different. And my father took his copy of the photo and had these additional copies made, which added these artifacts of the darkened hair, the apparent eyebrows, and the darkening of the bird on the tobacco bag. So I'm guessing that this is the history. The photo was taken, a group photo. There was a photo session, a group photo was taken, Echohawk, Carrie, and Leo. And then Leo posed by himself. They added the medallion and a shawl or something on his lap. They took that photo, and that was all done at the same session, the same day. Leo had his portrait, and George took the group photo at some point and had this special version made that just is a portrait of his father. Again, I don't know when that would have been done, but and I'm guessing now that Brummett's version might be a closer approximation of the result that George got when he went to a photographer and said, could you edit this photo and cut out these two people?
Roger, I don't remember who it was who told me when this photo started circulating around the family that the original photo, whichever one it was actually found in the Smithsonian. I don't recall that I was told by who found it. But that might be worth looking into, whoever can do that, to see, if somewhere in the photo files of the Smithsonian Institution, maybe Kevin Gover can look into that for us, to see if the quote original photo or original photos are there. And we just got copies of them. That's what I was told. And for the life of me, I don't remember who told me that.
That's a really good point, and there are important things that we can be thinking about as we're pondering these mysteries. It's possible that the original group photo or George's, original portrait that he had made are at the Smithsonian. But I went to the Smithsonian, to the National Anthropological Archives at the National Museum of Natural History, and I saw this photo in the collections there. And Uncle Bruce, I think, was the one who brought it and deposited it there in the early 70s. And so it was this photo. Now, my memory told me, oh, this is the same photo I've got already. It had a comment by Uncle Bruce on it. Now I don't know, maybe it's closer to the Brummett image, and I don't know. So a comparison might be useful to do, because I'm guessing that would be a good quality image. And if it's closer to the Brummett photo than this one, the Brummett photo that's on the headstone, I think is better quality. It doesn't darken, make him look like he's got, black eyebrows and dark hair. So that's an interesting issue. And if Uncle Bruce dropped off, say, the original group photo too, and I just never saw it, that would be a great thing to have, to know that the photo was out there. And so that's I'm glad you brought that up. We can certainly give some thought to that to investigate. So here's one thing that happened. Brummett got interested in, he has a number of artworks that have to do with Christmas time. And he wrote an account of Christmas in Pawnee land that, in his understanding, had to do with Leo. And so at some point, I don't know when this was, he wrote up an article for a Tulsa newspaper, and he did some artworks, and he took the group photo and it was published with it. Now, I don't know when this happened, and I actually don't, since I haven't seen it, I don't know what illustrations were with the original. But at Christmas time,
most likely that would have been the Tulsa World, because that's who published his comic strip. And
that's
so I
who
know
it
he
was.
had a strong association with the Tulsa World.
And that's who it was. Now, what I saw in 2019 on the Facebook Pawnee Tribal and Family News page was a poorly done scan of an article that was published in 1965 that had two comments by an named editor attached with it. And the editor made some comments about it. And one of the comments was, we published this a few years ago, and every Christmas we think about it. And finally, here it is again. So this is in December 1965, meaning that the original article had been published sometime earlier, a few years earlier. I'm guessing, just as a working assumption, that it was sometime around 1960, maybe the late 50s, the early 60s, but a few years before 1965. So somebody in the family had the group photo in 1965 or around 1960. Somebody had that and loaned it or to Brummett, or he had it in his possession, the group photo. And the newspaper used it in their 1965 reprint. Now, I don't know if it appeared in the earlier one, but the 1965 reprint of his story, it had 3 illustrations done by Brummett in this photo, the group photo. So that's where we got the photo. Lance and I, we got it from Facebook, and it's not the greatest quality, but Brummett had it at that point in time. And I'm guessing maybe the original is in his papers. I don't know. Or maybe the newspaper has the original or a copy of it in their files still. I don't know how they manage that, but those are some possibilities. And so Brummett published this article, and the reason why he wanted to have the image in there is because it's a Christmas story that he said is, it involves Leo Echo Hawk. So Lance, now let's turn to
So where is the start of this that you want me to read? Is it after these asterisks?
hold on a second. I wanted to okay, the editor of this 1965 reprint, he had a couple of comments here that I want to read. This story, this was at the beginning of the reprint. This story of the first visit by the white man Santa Claus to the children of the Pawnee Indian Reservation was first published in words missing world December 2 something question mark, I couldn't make it out, 19 something. And for years we've had to resist the temptation to rerun it. This year was the year we didn't even attempt to resist. It's a family story, started partly by the author's late grandfather Echo Hawk, and partly by the author's uncle Leo Echo Hawk of Pawnee, who, as one of the figures in the story, might be a trifle biased. Okay, so that's the editor's introductory comment saying the story comes from its grandfather and from his uncle. So I've asked Lance to read that story. That's important to keep in mind. Now, here's a sidebar caption to the photo, again attached by an unknown editor. Brummett probably had a hand in it, I don't know. The boy in this Pawnee family group of a good many years ago admitted he was in the forefront of the stampeding Indian children when the story of Santa Claus's first terrifying appearance on the reservation was told to Brummett Echo Hawk. the boy is Leo Echo Hawk. And so the story that Lance will read in a little bit here, it sounds like it's an account that Brummett heard from his grandfather, but he was too young for that. So he heard it from older relatives, maybe from his father, from his Uncle George, maybe from Leo, maybe from his Aunt Alice, maybe from Lottie Echo Hawk, somebody. Probably at Christmas time said, oh, here's a story that the old man used to tell. I'm guessing about that. But there is some confusion here because this editor thought that Leo was one of the main actors in the story itself. But then the story seems to be taking place during the 1880s or 1890s, before Leo was born. So there's some real confusion here. But nevertheless, this is the document we have, the photos we have. And now I've asked Linda to sit down and read an account of Christmas. Let me introduce it just a little bit here. This is an account of Christmas that was published by the first writer in our family, Lucy Little Chief. Her mother was Sadie Crazy Horse Little Chief. She married Little Chief Achawi Reisaru, a community leader, and they had a daughter, Lucy, who went off to boarding school and wrote this story and published it in 1907. It's called How Pawnees Celebrate Christmas. And this is an interesting story because Echo Hawk was around in 1907. He attended the Christmas events that Lucy is going to talk about when Linda reads the story. And so this account of Christmas time from 1907 applies to the years after 1900 to 1907. And Lucy Little Chief's memories. Now, her mother, as I said, was Sadie Crazy Horse. Sadie's father was Crazy Horse. Crazy Horse was a brother of Echo Hawk's father and one of the 7 brothers. Echo Hawk's father and Crazy Horse were 2 of the 7 brothers. And so Lucy Little Chief was a close relative of Echo Hawk. And her memories are of events that Echo Hawk and other family members would have observed. So Linda, could you read this account?
Hi, everyone. This is Lucy Little Chief's story from 1907, How Pawnees Celebrate Christmas. We celebrate our Christmas almost like Thanksgiving in Pawnee. All the bands gather together at the dancing hall a few days before Christmas Day and make their homes there so they are then ready for Christmas. They arrange the hall and what they are going to do that day. All the noted chiefs from the different bands decide where they will get the Christmas tree from. The day before Christmas, early in the morning, they send some men after the tree. Then they put it up in the hall, ready for Christmas Day. On the morning of Christmas Day, the men get themselves ready for prayer meeting in the hall. Our missionary comes and talks with them about Christ and how it came we celebrate Christmas Day. After the missionary gets through talking, the head chief gets up and tells them the Christmas dance will begin at a certain time. Then they are dismissed. The ladies have the Christmas dinner all ready when the men come out. After dinner, the singers are called in to practice while the people get ready for the dance. The dancers put on their Indian costumes and paint their faces in many different colors. Everybody is invited to dance. Before the dance begins, the singers beat the drum to give the signal that the dance will begin. The chiefs are seated in front, the dancers and singers on the sides of the chiefs. The ladies are seated in the back, the men in front. Before the dance begins, the chief prays and they all smoke the peace pipe. The missionary is then allowed to pray, and after he gets through, the singers beat the drums and the dancers give war whoops. The dancers put on their war bonnets and bells and the things that they have when they dance. While the dance is going on, some of the older Indians get up and give their presents to their relatives or friends. They give horses, moccasins, blankets, or money. The rest of the presents are on the tree. The dance goes on for a long time till about 5:30. They then have prayer from the 4 chiefs of the different bands. Then the missionary preaches for a while. Then the chief calls on certain persons to give out the presents. After they are given out, they have some talks from the chiefs about Christmas Day. Then the Christmas lunch is brought in. After supper, the dance begins and lasts until late in the night, everybody happy for what they received and gave that day.
Thanks for that, Linda. And I wanted to point out that I think if we were to compare this account with Brummett's account, we'd find many things to compare. Now, I'm going to ask Lance to read Brummett's account of Christmas in Pawnee land. And I would note that Brummett's account, I think, has 2 parts to it. The first part goes down to, it's an intro to the history of Christmas in Pawnee land. And it talks, in my mind, it sounds like it's talking about the 1880s and 1890s, in which this original incident happened. And then after that, it mentions after the turn of the century. Now here we have a clue. The story turns at that point, and I think then goes into Leo's memories of early Christmas times. So that part of it would apply to the time period from, let's say, 1908, 1909, 1910, up through his childhood, Leo's childhood, up to the time the photo was taken of the group, the family group portrait. So the first part of what Lance is going to read to you, in my estimation, applies to this early time period and Christmas customs as they were entering Pawnee land. And then there's a dividing point that is talking about the same period in general and a little bit later that we just heard from in the Lucy Little Chief story. So I just wanted to open with that intro. So I'll turn it over to you, Lance, to read the story now.
Okay, Roger, do you want me to read the parentheses part at the top?
No, that's not necessary.
Okay. Brummett Echo Hawk, Santa Claus wore Indian clothes. For the Pawnees, Santa Claus and Christmas have come a long way since the founding of the Indian Agency in 1874. The town of Pawnee then was mostly a tent city on Black Bear Creek. The Pawnees, a few years before, had been moved by the government from Nebraska. There was no Oklahoma then, just Indian territory. The Pawnees knew little about Christmas as we know it today. On that day, they sang, danced, had a feast and prayer. Santa Claus was unheard of. In those days, the Indian children were kept at a government boarding school during the whole school year. At Christmas, they got to go home for the holidays. Before leaving, the children took part in the school's Christmas program. The parents were invited. The program wasn't much. The children mumbled recitations and sang songs about Christmas. It wasn't easy. Most of the kids did well to speak English. The program didn't mean much to the kids either. See that their parents and getting to go home was the thing. That was Christmas. During one program, when Jingle Bells and other Christmas songs were getting a going over in fractured English and Pawnee, Santa Claus came in. It was the first time the Indian kids had ever seen Saint Nick. Some of the parents had seen pictures of the old boy, but most of them hadn't. Shades of General Custer. The children barreled out of their seats and stampeded for the door. The lumpy figure in bright red only made things worse when he raised his hands to wave a greeting. He had had it. The teachers tried to block the door. They tried to call the kids back. It was no use. That Christmas, Santa was left holding the bag. A lot of kids are frightened a bit and curious when they meet Santa Claus for the first time. With Indian kids, then it was different. Having lived on the reservation, they almost never saw anyone with a beard. Most Indians didn't shave at all, much less grow a beard of any kind. The next, the next year, there was only singing. That was a Christmas. There was a Christmas tree too. The tree met much more enthusiasm than last year's lumpy figure with a bushy face. During this program, the kids kept one foot in the aisle for the fast getaway. They expected the thing to show up again. When the Pawnee kids had untwisted their tongues and retied them around Deck the Halls, a different approach was used by the white teachers to incorporate Saint Nick. This time he was an Indian, and he wore Indian clothes too. His headdress was complete with feathers. On his feet were moccasins. He wore leggings too, not very Santa-like, but that's who the man said he was. He said it in Pawnee dialect too. Santa Claus shouldered a big bag of candy and fruit. He spoke to the kids and joked with the old folks. Santa Claus for the Pawnees had arrived. At the turn of the century, a framed church was erected for the Pawnees in the vicinity of the Indian Agency. It was a nice church, nothing fancy. It had a simple spire that housed a big iron bell that had rung just before church time. When the Christmas rolled around, the Indians held their own program in the church on Christmas Eve. The church was always crowded. Each year brought new changes. Inside the church glowed a big pot-bellied stove, and up front near the choir stood a tall, fresh-cut cedar tree. This was the Christmas tree. It wasn't real fancy, but it exuded a kind of brightness and a warmth that made folks feel good. Under the tree were many presents. The gifts might be such things as a whole bologna, a sheep-lined coat, or the latest type BB gun. Seldom were the presents wrapped. Fancy paper came later. Folks enjoyed exchanging gifts now. The preacher began things with a brief service. He paused now and then to let the Indian deacon translate the text to the older Indians. The service was always about the three wise men and the babe in the manger. After the service, they sang Silent Night and other Christmas songs. The children recited Christmas rhymes. Some kids were shy, others weren't. The smallest of them stood a few minutes trying to remember their first lines. After a while, they got stage fright and bawled. The youngsters forgot everything when they heard the sound of sleigh bells outside the church door. In came Santa. He was given a warm reception. Happiness reflected on the faces of both the young and old. The older folks remembered when St. Nick wore Indian clothes. Santa presented the first of the gifts. Everyone got something, he made sure. There were apples, oranges, and candy for all. Though Santa Claus has long since shed his Indian clothes for his present dress, he still talks and jokes with the other Indians in their native tongue. In that way, the spirit touches all, for few of the elders' generation remain. Their language is passing too. And when Santa stops to shake hands and talk to an old bent lady, it makes everyone feel good. Good because the spirit of Christmas is the same in all languages. The kids all speak English now. They breeze through Jingle Bells without even thinking about the English language. And Santa Claus, they know. They even know of his extra reindeer with the red nose. Some of the kids stampede, none of the kids stampede for the door when St. Nick comes in. He is welcome now. This time, when the man in red with the bushy face departs, he leaves everyone with the Christmas spirit. Santa Claus has come a long ways.
Thanks for reading that, Lance, and Linda also. So these are stories of Christmas in Pawnee land that we can have access to and catch glimpses of how things happened. And so I'm just assuming that the outline that I gave of the first part of Brummets' account is probably accurate. He starts off talking about before the turn of the century, and then he gets to, and he says this after the turn of the century. And so the original account, which was passed along in the Echohawk family, was of Pawnee children and their first impressions of Santa Claus. Now, I find that interesting because Christmas customs in the American world, they are an evolving thing. And the image that we have of Santa Claus really first began to appear during the 1860s and by 1881, especially through a New York cartoonist. The use of Christmas trees as items in Christmas culture were also an addition that came around that same time period. And so when Brummett's account talks about the earliest moment where Christmas is being celebrated in Pawnee land, Christmas is coming together as the holiday that we understand. And then by the time Lucy, Little Chief, writes her account, Christmas camp celebrations are well established in Pawnee land. Now, the use of a cedar tree and presents associated with it and gift giving, this is also done in a Pawnee ceremony that was still being practiced in those days, called the bear dance. in which in the course of this ceremony, they go out to acquire a cedar tree. Now, in our past meetings, we've talked about the Pawnee storytelling about cedar trees and their special nature. And in this bear ceremony, they have a special ritual for acquiring a cedar tree, bringing it inside the Earth Lodge to use for a ceremony. And gifts are associated with this tree. Gifts are put around it and then handed out to the attendees in the course of this ceremony. So I don't know if this was added on to reflect Christmas, or if the Pawnees had this as part of this ceremonial practice for a long time, and they said, oh, this is going to help us relate to this holiday season, Christmas time. And so the present day Pawnee customs that we have of having a Christmas dance, and our customs of having a Christmas tree and gift giving, these are rooted in both cultural custom systems in the American world and in Pawnee land. And so these accounts of Christmas that we're reading, and I've read a few other accounts from slightly later in time, they are reflecting an important time period in Pawnee history when the merging of American systems and Pawnee systems is happening, and it's very meaningful. So that's what I wanted to share and talk about. And Lucille, I'm so glad you attended and shared with us this information. I'm guessing that other family members, as they view this video in the weeks to come, and we get together next year to resume our talks, maybe somebody will have some additional information about these photos and these customs.
I have a question, Roger. As Christendom kind of came into Pawnee land, was there a predominant denomination that had our area and proselytized, or we in contact with various denominations?
Yes, that's a really good question. The first exposures to Christianity came during the 18th century. There's an account of a Skeety leader visiting a French fort, and there's a little conversation about Christianity there, and comments by the French record maker saying, oh, this Pawnee leader, he sounds like he's a Christian. I don't know. I feel doubtful about that. I think they were just doing politics and relationship building. And so I feel doubtful that there was any kind of Christian ideology in Pawnee land at that point in time. Now, during the 1830s, Christian missionaries, Presbyterian missionaries, came to Pawnee land, and they learned the Pawnee language. They lived with the Pawnees. They shared their thinking about Christianity, but they had no success in making converts, in proselytizing. I've seen no record that says, oh, we established the church and there are 30 Pawnees who are members of it now. There's nothing like that. So these missionization projects of the 1830s and 1840s and onward, they didn't attract, as far as I can tell, any notable Pawnee participation. Now, there were also Pawnees who were married into and related to French families in St. Louis. Baptiste Bael, his father came and got him when he was a teenager, I think, because of the Sioux attacks on the Pawnee cities during the 1840s, and took his son to St. Louis, where he learned English and Spanish and French. And it's very possible that some Pawnees with these connections to families in St. Louis also had exposure to, and maybe even became Christians in St. Louis. That's possible, very arguable. Uh, and but there wasn't any kind of Christianization in Pawnee land until the late 1880s and the ghost dance in the early 1890s. When the Pawnees removed a family that came through the French fur trade, moved south with the Pawnees. This was two brothers and a sister, the Carrions. They were Sioux and French. And I think they were among the Pawnees because their French parent, a father, I believe, was related to the Pawnees through these French families in St. Louis. And so they moved south with the Pawnees. And one of those, the members of that family, Adolphus Carrion, he became a Christian during the 1880s, and he launched a Methodist mission there, I think in 1885, 86, around that time period. And he went around with a Pawnee interpreter to the different households, according to his own account, and talked to them about coming to church, the Christian religion. And he had some success. I think as time went by into the 1890s, he began to have a congregation. And I don't know the details of that history. I think it was fairly modest. It included probably people like Baptiste Bael, who knew all about Christianity, and a handful of other Pawnees who, again, through this deeper history, were attracted to the Christian religion. And so during the 1880s and 1890s, this missionary project was beginning to show some success. But then the ghost dance happened. And the Native American church came at the same time. Both of these religious systems were extremely Christian, extremely so. And so in Pawnee land, almost all the Pawnees became Christians in 1892. This opened the door for Christianity to be a real presence in Pawnee land. It changed a lot of things. The Pawnees were integrating their own religious ideas and their own traditions with Christian traditions. So we find a skeety, mystical ghost figure that was killed by the Sioux and brought to life by the animals, being compared to Jesus. And so this made Christianity palatable in Pawnee land. And by the mid 1890s, all the Pawnees were Christians, all of them, except for a few. The older Pawnees who were priests of the existing Remnant ceremonial system, they were not getting younger Pawnees as students, as younger, people who were coming to them to learn about the ceremonial ways. This was a factor in their decision by the priests and the family elders and the leaders of the community to decide to create a record of Pawnee tradition, working with a skeety named James R. Murray during the late 1890s onward. And so this is how Christianity entered Pawnee land. Really, it was through the ghost dance primarily. And so the ghost dance continued on into the century that followed. And by 1920 or so, I've seen one report that says, oh, here's the number of Pawnees who were Christians. a significant number. I forget what it was off the top of my head, but it did not count the ghost dancers and Pawnees who had absorbed these other Christian systems that the Native American church had a good number of adherents, I think maybe 40 to 60. There was still ghost dances that were held every so often. And so I think, as I'm arguing, by the 1890s, almost all the Pawnees were Christians of one kind or another. Now, according to the practices of Christianity in the American world, a good number of these Pawnees may not have qualified in their eyes as being Christians, but they were. This is Christian cultural diversity at work.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Does anybody have any follow-up thoughts or comments?
I'd like to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and to say to Katie, happy birthday. Way to go, girl.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for that presentation, Roger. I certainly have some fond memories of Christmas myself in the 50s and 60s being in Pawnee. I'm wondering if you guys have, we got the three elders on the call here. What your memories are of Pawnee? Did you spend much time going to Pawnee at Christmas time? Oh, Mary, you're muted. I mean, Katie.
I don't recall being in Pawnee at Christmas often. Co, John, do you?
I don't recall we ever went
I don't either.
unless it was affiliated with a funeral or whatever. But for the holiday itself, no.
No, I don't think we ever did.
Yeah.
We always stayed in Farmington.
Well, I never got to see Farmington at Christmas, but to me, Pawnee was a really magical place at Christmas. Did you guys ever spend any time at my grandparents' on my mom's side at the bakery? It was right there on Main Street.
I remember the bakery, but I don't remember spending significant time there.
Yeah,
Yeah, I remember it too.
yeah.
Me too.
Well, a lot of those years we lived up in Missouri, so we'd all hop in the car. Dad would say, get your paper sacks and pack some clothes. We didn't use suitcases much. And we would go spend the Christmas living above the bakery on Main Street. There was our grandparents' apartment was up there. And Pawnee was a different place then. When I went there for college in the 70s, it was drying up. It was it was a bedroom community for Stillwater. That was about it. But when we were kids, it was a thriving community. And I think the farming economy around it was working, and there were a lot of small farms. And on Saturday, I don't know if it was Friday night or Saturday night, it was almost like a block party. The stores would stay open, but not really for business. And people would come in and they'd park their cars all on that street in front of the bakery and all around the square. And it was crowded. I remember my grandparents keeping that bakery open, and people would come in and just visit. Well, I can remember my grandpa sweeping up the wood floor, visiting with customers, and people sitting on the hoods of their cars, visiting with people walking by. But when Christmas came around, it had that atmosphere. They'd put up all the lights on the street posts, and the Santa Clauses and the reindeers would be all lit up and glowing. And we would roll in from Missouri in the middle of the night, sleepy, wake me up and carry me from the sidewalk, the door that there was a stairway that went up to the apartment upstairs. And of course, it's a bakery, so every Christmas delight was there. And Granny was a real fan of putting up Christmas trees, and she had those lights on them that bubble. I don't know if you remember those, but
Those too.
yeah, it was a real magical time to get to go to Pawnee, and then the next morning run down to Ermey's. I don't know if was Ermey's a thing for you guys?
I don't remember that.
Yeah, it was, they had a bunch of sec buildings in a row. It was kind of like playing Monopoly, and they were getting all these buildings in a row, but there was a big giant toy section, and just everybody in town. There was a soda fountain in there, and there would be these chairs lined up, and there'd be these old Indian people kind of congregated. It was almost like the Starbucks of the 50s or 60s. They'd all be sitting in there visiting with each other, and somebody would walk by, and they'd all say, "Oh, he's just no good," They'd have a lot to say about all the passerbys. But yeah, the atmosphere of being around Pawnee at Christmas has just stuck with me, and made Christmas a really favorite time for me.
It was a favorite time for all of us too. We would probably just say similar things about Farmington. It was great. It was a great time to be. We had a drugstore called Pop Smith's. You could go down in there, and that's where all of us, all the kids, John, Seal, Fred, all of us would go in there and shop around with our little bit of money to buy Mom something for Christmas. And you guys remember, we always bought her the same thing. It was called Evening in Paris. It was in a blue bottle. I can't remember what it smelled like, but we just thought that was the ultimate. So it was fun. Or bath beads, those bath beads that were all different colors. We did that too.
That's what we could afford.
Yeah. And we had a charge account at Pop Smith's, remember? We could have a Coke at Pop Smith's, so it was pretty good.
And we would always buy Dad the quote, smell good.
Yeah.
Aftershave lotion. I forget what kind.
Probably a spice or something like that.
Anyway, fun times.
It was fun.
But my recollection of Pawnee growing up is it was always the same. It never grew. It never shrunk. And it's only in recent years when I go there that it strikes me, that, so much has aged, and a lot of businesses have closed. And, in a way, it's kind of sad. But it's still there. And, certainly the relationships between the tribe and the Pawnee city itself, town, whatever it is, have improved through the years. So, but lots of memories there. Lots. But we spent most of our time out west. We didn't really go into town that much when we were there. And it was usually around a funeral. And so, of course, we weren't supposed to be acting up. So.
Well, that's another thing about Christmas is everybody is on good behavior and having a good time.
Wasn't just Christmas. I mean, our mother and father were real disciplinarians in that regard. Children are to be seen and not heard, and we followed the rules. So.
Or you got killed.
That was certainly the fear.
Well, we had that going on too. Yeah, it'd be interesting to hear all the notes on all these Echo Hawk brothers from their kids.
It would be.
Well, before, Roger, did you have anything else, or Deb? Before I turn off the recording, I thought I'd show some of these photos that have popped up here. And that way, if somebody watches this video and they want to see what the artwork was, they could see it.
It was a wonderful talk, Roger. It was really great.
Yes, thank you, Roger.
Thank you.
And Deb, if you have a final word to say on this, please.
She's getting ready for the open house tomorrow.
She's a dual tasker. She likes to get things done while she listens.
Right.
Well, it's interesting to reflect on how Christmas has evolved over the years, and to kind of get a way back look at it, how it was in Pawnee at former times that we wouldn't know anything about if we, didn't have this kind of information.
Mhm.
One of the things that happened here, and John will remember, is for many years, the American Indian College Fund always put on this, it came to be called the Elders Dinner. And it was always at Christmas time. And they still have it, but it's different now. And we're not even having it this year because of COVID, and didn't last year either. But Dad always loved to go to the Elders Christmas dinner here, and because his favorite part was Santa Claus. Rick Waters, who is now the executive director of the Denver Indian Center, would always dress up as Santa Claus. And I mean, he went to great lengths to really look like Santa Claus. And he would come in, ho, 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 and he'd have elders come and sit on his lap and whatnot, including our father. But the best part about his rendition of Santa was always in his bag with the toys was an OU flag, and Dad would get the biggest kick out of that. And he and Rick would go back and forth when it would be his turn to talk to Santa Claus and get a gift. So they don't have Santa because Rick would have two roles now, but hopefully next year we'll be able to have the Elders Dinner back, and maybe we can find a new Indian Santa. Because he would even Indian dance. They would have a drum group in there, and Rick would be dancing with his OU flag. It was great. Do you remember anything else about that, John?
No, that's about it. That was great. Your dad really, really liked it.
Was he an OU fan, or?
Oh, yes.
Oh, gosh. We lived and died OU every year in football.
Oh my
When
God.
Dad finally got to go see an OU game, eventually he went to the Notre Dame game, and that was the one where they got defeated. He came home pretty sad.
That ended their big winning streak of how many games? I don't even remember that they had won in a row.
Something, I don't know.
It was an astronomical number, but
Yeah.
47 in a row they had won.
oh
There
my
you
gosh.
Wow.
Yeah, it
There's
was-
still a lot of OU fans around here, including Rick Waters. I met with him today, and we were having some good laughs and memories. But we didn't talk about when he was Santa for the Elders Dinner, so I'll have to remind him he has to get healthy and be Santa next year. Get somebody else to MC and be Santa. There's Deb.
Lucille and John, you remember Dad used to tell that Santa story about when Santa came in and everybody started crying and trying to climb out windows. You remember him telling that?
Oh, no, I don't.
Yeah, I do. John, do you remember that?
No, I don't.
Yeah. Well, I'm 80. That's the reason I remember it.
You got the advantage on us.
That's right.
And maybe the others of us are senile. Oh, I'll tell you that. No, but
Got that.
I can imagine, yeah. We had lots of stories, that's for sure. So Deb, Roger had a question for you.
Oh, I just wanted to make sure, Deb, that you had a chance to add to the conversation here if you have something to say.
Oh gosh, that was really spellbinding to listen to all of it. And I appreciate hearing all this and learning too, and even finding out that Rick Waters is director of the Indian Center is pretty interesting too. Um, but yeah, no, I don't have anything to add. It's just you know, we have had a few Christmas dinners where Santa Claus came in a sleigh in the middle of the roundhouse, and we had gifts all along the edges to give out to different age groups, and that was always fun. We haven't done that in a few years though, but we do have the Christmas dance, and so that's on Christmas Day, and everybody's kind of geared up for that this year. So yeah, I mean, we don't have Santa Claus come in on at the Christmas dance either. It's more kind of like a social dance. But yeah, it's fun. I mean, everybody runs around and gives everybody fruit and stuff like that. And
You guys are gonna have to resurrect the Indian Santa Claus.
yeah, I guess so. We'll have to see where Rick's at this Christmas. If he's in Oklahoma.
Actually, he's coming to Oklahoma, he told me today. He's leaving next Thursday or something, Wednesday or Thursday. So, but of course, he's going to Kiowa country.
Oh gosh, that's way down south.
Yeah, his brother's now the tribal administrator or something down there. They got more politics than we did.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, no, it's pretty good. We're just gonna try to just bring in a little bit of Christmas cheer with our open house. We have a elephant. What's that called? Some kind of game, with gift giving that's gonna take place. And
A white elephant.
The white elephant.
yeah, there it is. And I've never played it, but sounds brutal actually. Uh, but yeah, we're just getting geared up. Gina and I are still working out on the porch here, and it's starting to get chilly, so we're working as fast as we can. We want to get it done. So yeah, Lance is right. I just keep working every time I get on a Zoom call. Our Friday nights are just still working. We'll probably be working all weekend too. So, but it's all good fun. Doesn't feel like work. Anywho, yeah. Thank you for everything, everybody.
Well, thank you again, Roger. Are we wrapped up on that?
I just have one thing I'd like to share, particularly with Roger, but it's for everybody too, is in one of my hats that I wear with the Colorado Commission of Indian Affairs, there at the table on I don't even know what they call it, the special commission to rename the racist names of mountains and other sites in Colorado, and at least two have been renamed. Quote, Squaw Peak has a new native name named after I can't remember what it is, but they get all of this traffic of things to be renamed, and they're looking for input from the historical tribes of Colorado, one of which is our own. And so I asked them at the last meeting if they would please send those announcements to me when they get them. And I would share them with Roger and with Carlton Gover, who may have some suggestions for renaming some of these things. So just stand by, Roger, because I think, this may be an important opportunity, because I don't know what all they're gonna rename, but it's developed some momentum in the state. And we are one of the 48 historical tribes of the state.
Is Pikes Peak a candidate for renaming?
I don't know, it might be. Maybe that's something we push for. I don't know. What do you think, Roger?
Well, I have been doing a lot of research on Pawnee geography this year, and it's really it sort of moved me to be even more thoughtful about Pawnee naming places. Those names have vanished in usage for the most part, but I think in Pawnee land, the names of rivers and places deserve to be remembered, and I'm going to use those names as much as I can. And so, the Pikes Peak area itself, there are Pawnee names as far as I know for two places in the Rocky Mountains, Pikes Peak itself and the mountains around them. Those Pawnee names are known. I know them through my research. They might not be widely known in Pawnee land right now, but my research is telling me that those places, the Pawnee name for Pikes Peak itself, the phrase that the name was translated into English by, it appears in various stories that talk about things that are central to Pawnee identity, like the coming of corn cultivation, the beginning of buffalo hunting, the place where spirit land touched the earth, the place where dreams come to earth. Now, dreams are important because in Pawnee land, in Pawnee culture, if you study the ceremonies and the traditions, dreaming entered those things in very formal ways. In other words, they weren't just personal accounts of interesting things that happened, but there was a whole process by which dreaming shaped ceremonies and therefore shaped what Pawnee identity is. Now that's no longer the case, but Pikes Peak, in my opinion, is at the center of Pawnee identity, not at the edge of Pawnee land. And so I think that there's been a lot of interest, as far as I can tell, in mulling over what this means. And Matt Reed would be a person to involve in this as well. He has done some, Walter and me and James writing in, we all went to the Air Force Academy a few years ago, and I was just starting my research on this. But that's where we first started talking about, what is Roger saying and what does this mean? And I think that so far people are really interested. And Matt has sort of taken that up a little bit. It's continued consultations with whatever groups are involved in managing aspects of Pikes Peak. So he would be somebody who could maybe help formulate an official Pawnee Cultural Preservation Office approach to thinking about Pikes Peak and giving formal Pawnee Nation input on this. And I sent him a book that I wrote in which the centerpiece is talking about this. So he has that, and he tells me he looks at it every so often. But he's got access to very good information. My research has continued. So I fine-tuned the naming of Pikes Peak and the mountains around it. And maps today, it's called Rampart Range. It goes all around Pikes Peak and up to the Air Force Academy. And if you look at the geography, it looks like one feature. And this explains the Pawnee name for that, which is in Pawnee Scout records, but I just figured out the translation of that. And so we have Pawnee names for the Rampart Range and a Pawnee name for Pikes Peak. And I think it's a really beautiful name, and it's very meaningful in Pawnee religious and cultural traditions. So, I mean, I have no idea how this would be received because this is not associated with the Pawnees at all. And so I don't have any idea where one would even start. But my research is getting out there. And if Matt wanted to take this up and make a project out of it, I know he's real busy with a lot of important things. So I don't know if he maybe he would like to do this, but maybe he couldn't. But
Is he in Colorado? Where is he? I don't know him.
With the Pawnee Nation,
Oh,
he's
okay.
the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer.
Okay. I bet I met him when I was there the day after Alexa's funeral.
And Deb knows Matt.
Well, I will tell you that, you know, in my dealings with the Colorado Commission of Indian Affairs and this renaming business by this special commission or whatever, they don't have a clue about Pawnee anything. And so I think there's potentially an opportunity here if we as Pawnees in Colorado and or in conjunction with our tribal nation want to have some input. I think that would be possible through the executive director of the Colorado Commission of Indian Affairs, who physically sits on that commission. And that's why when she brought it up at the last meeting, I raised my hand and I said, I would request when these things are coming up that you let me know and I'll share them with folks in our tribe who work on these issues. I don't recall that I mentioned your name or Carlton's specifically, but I think there's potentially an opportunity here because they don't know anything about Pawnee, anything. They don't know that it's sacred, that Pikes Peak is sacred to our people. They don't know that. And, you know, and it's kind of up to teach it. And even though you may have presented to the Air Force Academy, they didn't share that with anybody. So nobody knows that except whoever you talk to at the Air Force Academy. So there's a real need for education. And I think there's various ways to do that. And this commission that's in charge of renaming these things is one avenue.
Well, thank you so much for bringing this up with those guys. And I don't have any contact with them. I don't know anything about what they're doing. I've read some reports about that and I've sort of scratched my head and thought, you know, boy, it would be nice if, you know, I mean, the Pawnee association with Pikes Peak is so special. I don't know what to do, who to talk to. It's not my position to do that, but I'd be glad to help out any way I could.
Okay, well, I will speak with Catherine because I need to call her for a coffee date or whatever because of another comment I made during the meeting that caused a bit of a ruckus. So I need to clarify some things with her, but I will ask her what would be an appropriate avenue to do that in her opinion, because, you know, I don't even know who else on that renaming commission, but And that's one group that's going because they just renamed a branch library in Denver City and County. And that became a bit of an issue too, in terms of what native person that would be named for. And the John Imhula crowd won out, but it got kind of messy. And so, you know, I don't know how these things work, but anyway, you know, somewhere in there are opportunities for education and for, you know, making people smarter as they consider appropriate names for some of these things, particularly like Pikes Peak, you know, and its significance to the Pawnee peoples themselves. So,
well, if it seems like the moment comes, then it's difficult for me to get around. But I'd love to do a Zoom with you and Matt and the officials who would have some say over this. If
okay.
that is,
Let me talk to Catherine about whether she would be amenable to that and who else from that group could benefit from that. So I may well take you up on that. Let me visit with her some more and figure out how that all works, because, you know, I don't know, but I will find out. So anyway, thank you.
Well, with everyone's permission, I think I'll put that picture showing off to the next time. And go ahead and shut the recording off.